So today's class focuses on globalization and culture. And if you recall, in our first 2-3 meetings, we talked about the aspects of globalization and definitions. And one part where I felt that that I would find a lot of students and public very interested is this very topic, globalization of culture. Because unlike political globalization and economic globalization, it's something that we don't think about. We just need to be reminded that we are really living in a very globalized culture. And again, unless you think about this and you sort of come to realization, we take all of these for granted. But if you're asked, in what aspect can you feel that you live in a globalized world, I think culture must be the answer. Okay, so I have a long lecture outline, but that's what we will talk about today and in our next class. Okay, so I don't know if you find this interesting, but it is. The things that we talk about should really make you rethink about culture in general and globalized culture in particular. Okay, as a sort of a way of introduction, I think we already shared this idea that globalization of culture pertains to how cultural products, cultural experiences are shared all over the world. So people living in all different parts of the world now experience culture very similarly. Of course, they do still retain some aspects of their traditional culture, but in many respects, they are exposed to cultural experiences, cultural products that have been made possible only in the globalized era. Okay, so I think sort of a trivial example would be how people all over the world now drink Coca-Cola, right? Or watch an American program on television. Okay, so those are just two very trivial examples, but we're gonna look at other examples to again remind us that we live in a truly globalized world. Okay. Okay, so cultural globalization has been diffused by, and we can talk about many factors, but the 6 most important drivers of this cultural diffusion have been migration, colonization, and more recently, the mass media, the internet, popular culture, and international travel. Now, can anybody mention something that is not listed here? We have 6 seemingly most important catalysts of cultural diffusion, but can you think of something that can be added to the list as something that is really important in diffusing cultural products, experiences? Yes?
I think political organizations here important as well, because now it's much easier to go from one country to another, for example, and also to bring the goods and services to other countries. So political and economic globalization.
That's a very good answer. I think, political system is also an element of culture. Okay? So with the collapse of communism and with sort of the rise of democracy as the dominant political system, it has allowed more people to travel abroad and allowed for greater cultural interactions, right? So I think sort of democratization, okay, or democracy. Good answer. It's a good answer. Anyone else? Last call. Yes.
Multinational companies bring all the
MNCs. That's also a very good answer. Multinational corporations. You know, not only do they sell products they produce, but also have many of their workers, right, dispatched all over the world. Good example, Samsung, right? Every year it sends hundreds, if not thousands of Samsung employees to many subsidiaries throughout the world, okay? So when they do that, they're taking Korean culture with them, and through interactions with the people of host societies, maybe a new culture is created, or at least cultural interactions. Yes?
I think that the spread of like ethnic food is very important too, because like wherever you go, you can find a different, like I went to an Indian restaurant the other day, and so I thought that was cool. This is like from another country, it's basically like cultural definition of India in Korea. So,
although that's a good answer, I don't think it sort of is a medium through which cultural globalization is sort of attained. I mean, it's a wonderful experience to eat all these different ethnic foods, but it's not like one of these, right? Where again, I think the best term is how it's not really a medium of spreading sort of different cultures. I don't know, medium? Anyway, we could get back to that a little bit later. But if there's no other answer to the question, I'll like to move on. And I think we'll come back to foods because of, I think the couple of slides later, I'll be asking a similar question. Now, since we're talking about cultural globalization, can anybody define what culture is? Am I asking too many questions? An early Tuesday morning. You see, culture is really something that we live with, live by, and even live for. But when we're asked to define what it is, we have a hard time. Yes?
Maybe you could describe it as common good, like behavior or part of history, art, which shares a certain group of people.
Shared. I think that's a key term here. Whatever you talk about, culture is something shared, right, by the members of the community. Yes?
Unique costume, be like cuisine, food.
Okay, cuisine, customs. So we're going to talk about the elements of culture a little bit later. But anyone else? Yes? Way of life. Very good. Anyone else? I don't think there's really a bad answer to this. But here's the sort of a formal definition. Culture refers to the distinct ways that people living in different parts of the world adapted creatively to the environment. Okay? And culture includes all learned behavior and ways of thinking, and as well as patterns of behavior. Okay? So if you were to list the elements of culture, the list goes like this. It includes everything you see here and more, right? Language, ideas, beliefs, values, customs, music, arts, gestures, all of these. And in your free time, think about how you see manifestations of globalized culture. Let me just give you one example. Gestures. I mean, when did we start using, or at least knowing, what the middle finger means? Now that's, again, trivial example, but you know, we know, everybody in the world knows now, right? What the middle finger means, right? And with laws, constitution. Did Korea have constitution before we were exposed to the outside world? No. And most of our laws, if not all of our laws are based on the legal systems of the West, particularly Germany, right? So all over the world, they have laws now, but most of the laws have been learned, have been sort of imitated from the Western model. So you can do that for every one of these, okay? Beliefs, Christianity, right? We didn't have Christianity 300 years ago, but we do now, right? So you can, again, everything, right? Clothing. Is this Korean? No, right? So you could sort of take issues with every one of these and more, right? And in your free time, I want you to list more elements of culture, okay? Not specific things like chair, but something, you know, like a more general categories, right? And if you find something that is really striking, you could send it to me, okay? For a brownie point. You know what brownie point is? I'm not sure myself. But it's sort of an extra bonus points, let's say, okay? So, which aspects of culture are most globalized, do you think? So this is quite a subjective question. There's no real right answer to this. But yes?
Popular culture.
Popular culture. Okay, I don't think it's on the list here, but it should definitely be there. Yeah?
Political system.
Okay. That's also a right answer, but something more fun, yes?
Language.
Language, very good, yes. Right? Food, cuisine. Music. Yes. Clothing. Clothing. Okay, yeah. Sports, very good. I think you guys pretty much covered everything except one. Very good. Now we have everything. So, of course, you can argue with other items, but at least this is sort of what global studies sort of tend to focus on. Okay? So, of many things that are globalized, sort of four sort of things are highlighted as being sort of showing the magnitude of cultural globalization. So those four are religions, languages, cuisine, and sports. Okay? And after we cover these, if you could think of something that is as important as these four, we could try to add, right? So first, religions. Out of some 7.1 billion people living on Earth, 31% are Christian. So, you know, you could sort of easily remember, right, that about 1/3 of the world population are Christian, 23rd Muslim, 7.1 Buddhist, and 1.2 Unification Church members. Just kidding. Talking about Moonies. Are you familiar with that cult? Or the all right. So here's like a figure which shows you how the yellow shaded areas are Christianity-dominated countries. Red, Muslim. purple, Hinduism, right? And blue, Buddhism. And Korea is no color, because we have, you know, Buddhism and Christianity coexisting rather peacefully. I think Korea is one of the very few countries where Christianity and Buddhism have a sizable proportion of the population as members. Okay? And I don't know if you ever thought about why certain regions are dominated by particular religions. Can you think of any reason why, let's say in Africa, you have either a Christian or Muslim countries, but not necessarily maintaining their own traditional religions? Yes? Colonization. True, but at the same time, you know, these countries were not colonized by Muslim countries.
Or even wars for...
Wars, yes.
I would say specifically for North Africa, trade which predates colonialism.
Trade, okay? Yeah.
Because the religions reflect the traditional cultural positions. So, for example, most Africa has been trading with the Arab for a long time. So, some of Islamic laws also reflect the tradition of North Africa. So, I think that's the reason why certain regions believe in Islam.
Okay, good answer. But in addition to what you mentioned, one thing that you should keep in mind is this, that new religions prosper or penetrate successfully in areas where traditional religions are not strong. Okay, here's my point. Now, when missionaries arrived with colonizers in South America, did any country in South America have a powerful presence of traditional religion? Yes or no? Yes? Powerful? World religion? No, they had like tribal religion. No powerful priesthood, no powerful, yeah.
But wasn't the sun god in Inca and Aztec really powerful for them?
But in terms of organization of, let's say the religious organization, I mean the organizational complexity, the organizational power of the religion, their native religions was no match to the world religion like Christianity. Now, before you sort of think further, why didn't Christianity fail to penetrate the Middle East? You know, missionaries were sent there. Okay? Missionaries, thousands, tens of thousands of missionaries went to India. They could not succeed. Why? Hinduism. Okay? Middle East, Islam. But if you look at South America, all of Africa, they did not have powerful presence of their native traditional religions. And if you ask the same question about Korea, see, even Korea, although we are known as a country of Buddhism and Confucianism, if you recall, during the Joseon dynasty, that's when the missionaries came to Korea, right? Buddhism was totally suppressed. I mean, it was illegal to practice Buddhism. Okay? And it was illegal to practice shamanism, although some people secretly practiced these religions, but at least officially, these religions were dead. And people only practiced Confucianism, which was not really religion. So when the missionaries came to Korea, they were recorded as saying, Korea appears as a country with no religion. So, and if you look at the parts of Asia, same thing. They did not have a strong, powerful presence of traditional religions. Okay, so that was a sort of a side note, but let's move on. So the first example where we notice or we see a sort of a strong or powerful manifestation of cultural globalization is religion. Second example is languages, right? So Mandarin may have the largest number of native speakers with 935 million, but if you include the speakers who use English as a second language, then the number goes up to 1.5 billion. And I have a nice visual image. Okay, so the dark shaded countries are where English is either national or official language, or a language in which more than 50% of the population has fluency. Okay, or it is used as a lingua franca of government, higher education, and commerce. Okay, so Korea is not included as one of these, but who knows, right? At the rate in which we sort of really pressure, especially young people to learn and speak English, maybe it's not too far off before we're included on the list here. Okay. And this is where it gets a little bit fun. Cuisine. So the third aspect of sort of a cultural globalization, where it is sort of most strongly felt. And one sort of example we could talk about is McDonald's, right? And can you think of any other sort of food products or a phenomenon associated with food that sort of shows us that we live in a culturally globalized world? Yes?
For example, tomatoes.
Tomatoes.
Yeah, in Europe, you need it in nearly every dish, and yeah, it came from South America, with the colonies.
Okay. So the influx or the introduction of tomatoes to European diet. Okay? Sweet potatoes. And they're from South America, I believe. Okay? And potatoes, right? From South America too. And what else?
Coffee.
Coffee.
Traditional Korean food, but people drink coffee all the time.
Yeah, in terms of the amount of consumption, Korea is ranked number 6 in the world now. I already had 2 cups of coffee this morning.
You can't call this coffee. You can't call this coffee.
I mean, the one I have is real coffee, okay? But you're talking about the mixed coffee?
The coffee you get in most stores here.
Oh, true.
If you compare the color, but I tried to make my own coffee in hostels 2 or 3 times, and the hostel keeper was totally confused. Oh no, not too much coffee. And here we take, I think, maybe 3 times more coffee powder than Koreans do.
So what I'm reminded of right now is that I think quality is always more important than quantity, but I think we take pride in drinking a lot of coffee rather than drinking good quality coffee, right? And I won't name names, but I must admit that when I drink just a drip coffee from, let's say, North America, it is much better than what I could get in Korea. That's reality. So I think we're stuck with bad beans, right? Maybe that's a part of globalization where we get discriminated culturally. Okay, so coffee. What else? Cuisines. Pepper. Gochu. Red pepper. Okay, so that was introduced to Korea from China not too long ago, right? What about cattle? Did North America have cattle? Yes or no?
Yes, but not horses.
Cows, you mean?
Yeah, that's cattle.
So yeah, they had buffaloes, but they did not have like cows. So they were brought in by European colonizers. Okay. Okay, that's right. They didn't have horses either. Neither? Either? Okay. Anyone else? Yeah?
I have a very interesting one. It's the combination of chicken and beer.
But has that been
Yeah,
exported?
at least in China, young people after the drama, they always say, let's go to eat chicken and beer and something like that. So the Korean chicken restaurant has been spread out in China.
Okay. For those of you who are not familiar with this very uniquely Korean tradition, chi mek. That stands for chicken and mekju, right? So because that became sort of a popular tradition in Korea, that was featured in a very popular Korean drama, and when Chinese young people saw the drama, they got to sort of do the same thing, you know, after dinner or for dinner, they would go to a chicken place and have chicken and beer. And, you know, we have also a tradition called somak, right? You're mixing soju and beer. And did you know that Germans also have somak? But theirs is a little bit different. Sausage and beer. It makes sense, right? Somak? Yeah?
We have also in Germany beer and what schnapps, it's kind of vodka.
Ah,
But it's,
you mix it together.
yeah, normally you just do it if you're really, really drunk, so it's not so common like here. But you put the whole glass in the big glass.
Wow.
It's called nuclear. No, sorry, there's another one. It's called U-boat.
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 U-boat, okay.
U-boat. And if you switch it, if you have a big glass of vodka and a small glass of beer, but they do it just in some special way. It's a nuclear.
Oh, that's
U-boat.
real man strength. Without sounding sexist. I mean, even in Korea, we don't do it the other way, right? It's always a lot of beer and small amount of soju.
Anybody who did it, so.
Maybe I should try that tonight. Okay, anyone else? So since we mentioned Starbucks, but let's just have some figures here. McDonald's, over 69 million people eat, I guess, hamburgers at McDonald's each day. Okay, and McDonald's is benefiting more from the operations outside the USA than from domestic sales. And Big Macs can be enjoyed anywhere you go. That's one menu that's the same. Okay, I mean locally you may have bibimbap burger. No, what's the burger? Bulgogi burger, bibimbap burger. Anyway, and here's something, okay, I already raised the question. Now, how many of you knew that Seoul has more Starbucks stores than any city in the world? More than Seattle, where it was first started, right? Yeah, so you know, the idea that Koreans are coffee crazy is manifested in this one sort of datum or data, right? Okay, this is third or fourth? Fourth, sports. And when it comes to globalization of sports, I think you always mentioned soccer and American basketball, cricket. With all the Japanese sort of you know, rise in the international community as a sort of a semi-economic superpower, I wonder why, you know, sumo never took off as a popular sport. But you've watched sumo before, right? Isn't it fun to watch sumo wrestling? No? Why?
It's very scary.
But it has a very simple rule, right? You just try to get the opponent out of the circle or have the opponent fall to the ground. Very simple rule. But you know why the game, I mean, the Japanese did try to make it an Olympic sport, but they never succeeded. You know why?
It was too Japanese.
Too Japanese. What else? More important reason. They're tired, too sexy. Or too revealing. What do you think is the real answer?
Too revealing.
Too revealing. But people like...
They're too sexy for all that. All that.
Oh.
Hurts the eyes.
Anyone else? Someone who gets it right? Maxim Coffee. Very Korean. Sort of a global experience.
No one other than the Japanese plays.
Oh, no. You do have, you know, many Westerners playing.
Yeah, I know, like top sumo wrestlers are Mongolians actually, not Japanese.
Yes.
And there was also one Hawaiian, right? Anyway, the answer is?
Because it's a male sport.
Ah, that's the answer. You know, to be an Olympic sport, it needs participation from both genders. Okay? But it is considered a very sexist sport because only males. Okay? Let me share with you this one joke. Not joke, but something I saw on Saturday Night Live in the USA, not Korean version. About 20 years ago, this ad was very popular. Okay? After a hard-fought American football game, this very popular player is walking off the field with his head drooping because he lost the game. So this little kid goes up to the guy and gives him a Coke, right? And that you know, makes this player, who was really feeling down, all of a sudden, you know, has this big smile because of the Coke. And then, out of gratitude, he takes off his jersey and throws the jersey at the boy. And, you know, it's a happy ending story, right? The boy is happy getting the jersey. So this particular ad was parodied on SNL. It was a sumo wrestler. You can imagine almost, right? This guy lost a match and he's walking off the mound, and this Japanese kid gives him like a bottle of Coke in Japanese, not real Japanese, but you know, la la la, right? And then this guy, you know, grabs the bottle of Coke, drinks it, so happy. Guess what he does? He takes off. I mean, you know, you got to imagine what happened next, right? Supposedly, not supposedly, you don't get to see the big guy, but the little kid just grabbing onto the sumo, what do you call it? Sumo. Let's be more culturally sensitive here. Sumo pants. Okay, sumo uniform. Okay. Anyway, the last sort of ending shot of the little kid was him frowning rather than breaking into a wide smile. Okay, so in terms of sports being an important element of cultural globalization, is there anything you'd like to add to that? When it comes to sports, yes, it's soccer, that's the most popular sport in the world. And with the World Cup final being watched by like a billion people. But in respect to sports, is there anything you'd like to add, sort of talk about? Or is it a sort of an outstanding issue? Yes?
Education, because even the international bodies are trying to spread the Western education to every corner of the world.
So, is there some kind of a conspiracy, you think?
No, not really, but I wonder if is it right or not, because the traditional way of being more and standard.
Okay. Now, you would agree that cultural influences from the West have happened because of their economic sort of supremacy, right, over the rest of the world. Now, if we agree that, because of that, sports from the West, right, are sort of a dominant sports throughout the world. Soccer, basketball, ice hockey, golf, tennis. Now, is there any sport that you are aware of that is so fun to play and yet it is not a world sport because it is from, let's say, Indonesia or from Korea? Yeah?
Lacrosse? It's really fun. Like,
But that's North American, right? Lacrosse. Lacrosse is a Native American sort of a traditional sport, right? And yes, it is a very exciting sport, but who cares about Native American sport? No, I'm not saying my personal belief here. It's our attitude, right? To be considered sort of a hip, to play whatever, right? It's got to have this sort of a Western tag, don't you think? So any other traditional sport? What about jokku? What is that in English? If you haven't played jokku before, zoku, it's like the game of the rules of the game are similar to volleyball, except you do it with your feet, right? And I played both volleyball and zoku, really fun, but it never has become a popular sport outside of Asia, right? So there is this sports racism. I don't know if there is such a term, but it's something to think about, right? Any last sort of, yes?
I say Baduk is, I find it more different than chess, but chess is more widespread all over the world.
Baduk. Can we say that's a sport? I agree. I used to be in high school, I was a chess, I represented my high school, and I had all these cheerleaders, on the side, always, give me an A, give me an N. If you have cheerleaders, that's sport, okay? That's why I came to believe that chess is a sport. But if I didn't have cheerleaders, anyway, Baduk. I think I'm not a big fan of Baduk, but I think that could easily become more popular when the world becomes more Easternized. Okay, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Yeah.
I was going to say martial arts, particularly
martial arts.
East Asia, and there is a really Western kind.
Okay, there's one sport where East did have widespread impact, right? Taekwondo, karate, kung fu, right? And you could find practitioners, like the people who practice these sports throughout the world. Okay, so long before Samsung products penetrated parts of Africa, parts of the Middle East, parts of South America, we had Taekwondo instructors, right? In all these parts of the world from about half a century ago, believe it or not. Okay? So that's sort of a Hallyu, right? Long before we started using the term or the concept Hallyu, right? Now, from this slide on, it's not sort of a follow-up to what we just talked about. Okay, we talked about these 4 products or areas in which cultural globalization is most strongly felt. But here I'd like to talk about other examples of cultural globalization. So we talked about language, religions, cuisines, sports, but there are other examples of cultural globalization, and of course internationally sort of traded consumer brands. I mean, that's being put nicely. I'm talking about name brands. No, that's not even the right term, because every brand has a name, right? What's the better term? You know, the higher end sort of pricey items, what do you call those as a category? That's why I said I didn't want to use that term, because every brand has a name, right? Even the cheap ones at Walmart has names. So better term is? 명품. And that's in English? Luxury goods. Okay, luxury brands. Okay, and what luxury brands are there that are Korean made? I used to love Andre Kim's. Just kidding. Are there any Korean brands that are like luxury items? Yeah. MCM. Oh, that's not Korean.
No, the Korean person bought it from Germany. It wasn't popular by then, and she made it.
But it's Korean then now.
Yeah, now it's Korean.
Just like Fila. It went bankrupt in Italy, so the Korean guy bought the rights to the name, and now he's a millionaire. Okay? But Fila is only popular in Korea. Although MCM is popular in China, right now? Yeah?
Most people know.
Which?
Most people know Fila.
Fila.
You buy Fila.
Oh. Thank you. So, Fila. Any other Korean brands? So I think that's where we really need to do better, okay? To develop a brand that is, I mean, I think we could mention Amore Pacific, right? The Korean cosmetic brand that is very popular among people in Asia, right? And I think they have a very nice catchphrase, right? That Asians know their own skin the best, right? Than, let's say, Europeans. Global rise of popular cultural icons and artifacts. I did it on purpose. It's Gaga, right? And the news on CNN. And the spread of various objects and experiences to the people at all corners of the earth. Now, remember we went through this before, but I don't know how many of you really thought about this again in your free time. Like, list something that we are experiencing only because we live in a globalized world, globalized era. Something that is striking. List. It's open, right? Movies. Yeah. We didn't have movies before you know, we were exposed to movies through the West, or if not Japan. Yeah.
Almost everything in this room, because I think only few products in this room are made in Korea. Most of them are made in China or something.
Oh, that's true. Things that we use are, in many respects, made outside of Korea. And when it comes to where the particular product we are using was first made or invented, then it's really all non-Korean, right? Yeah?
This class.
This class. Yes. Can you be more specific?
Globalization class.
Yes. The fact that we have a class.
Education in English, maybe if you want.
Education in English, the fact that we're studying together in this group of, you know, among students from many different parts of the world, right? And someone drinking that particular brand of water, or anyway, I have a list here because I sort of came up with something that I think are sort of something that are really important in the sense that, you know, they're really that widely enjoyed, right? Fried egg. Now, did I mention this before? Why did I have fried egg there? Can anybody guess? See, traditionally, we didn't fry our eggs. We just boiled them, right? So the way we eat fried eggs is an example of our new experience because of cultural globalization. Okay? And what about French fries for Americans? You see, before the introduction of French fries, they only had mashed potatoes or potatoes that were broiled or baked. That's the term I was looking for. Television, Christianity, Christmas, Santa Claus, educational system, coffee, architecture, cell phones. You know, did you know that for a very long time, our ancestors believed that building a building more than a single story high was a violation of nature, right? So building something vertically was out of the question, okay? But now we sort of, you know, we live in a republic of apartments, right? So that's really another example of cultural globalization. Cell phones, smartphones. You know, there's a saying how we could live without without food for a month, without water for how many days? 3 days. And we die within 5 hours if you don't use smartphones now. So smartphones are that much more important to us than even food, right? And the list goes on. Visa. You know, that's very Western. That's American. As Americans first began using Visa. The calendar, the metric system, right? Computer, the internet, and I don't know if we mentioned this before, but the last one is music. No. Maxim is on the line. 2 cups. Tea? No. The one I think, this is not based on any surveys, but the one I think is the most important example. Social network, SNS. No. Business suit? No? I mean, if you could sort of, you can see the sort of a trend here, right? It's in terms of degree of importance, it sort of gets right, sort of down, right? And paper money. Wow, that could be on the list there too, right? Give up? Democracy. No. Bitcoin. Last call. Yeah. Stock market. No. Okay. Medicine. You know, that could be on the list, right? Western medicine, right? Because every culture has medicine, but we, of course, all over the world now, we use Western medicine, right? In addition to our traditional medicine. And the number one on the list is? You see, before this, what sort of a numerical system did we use? Chinese, right? And the Romans used their own, right? This has so much influences, right, on our sort of a scientific sort of ways of thinking, scientific revolution, all these experiments, sort of a scientific way of thinking, and that it has to do with Arabic numeric system. So as a result of globalization, people are less obliged to accept the culture into which they are born and are freer to interact or to embrace, right, all these different cultural elements which would afford them maybe even different identities. And we already talked about how people all over the world are increasingly consuming the same cultural products, okay? But one thing that we need to realize is how many cultural products we enjoy, if we are asked, we know where it is from, right? But we often don't think about it, right? I mean, whenever you read Harry Potter series books or whenever you watch these, did you ever think, wow, this is British or this is American? See, we don't, right? So we have become sort of culturally desensitized to the origins. We just enjoy, right? Maybe it's a good thing, bad thing. It's up to your interpretation. Okay. Next slide is about cultural globalization has very deep roots, and we already talked about how some things come from elsewhere, but now it's sort of spread everywhere, right? Now, and I want to sort of jump ahead and move to this question. I already mentioned how cultural globalization is driven, okay, by the West, not because it sort of conspires to become culturally most powerful, region or countries in the world, but the fact of the matter is, countries that are economically dominant have cultural products that are appealing. Maybe in a way, they are imposed upon other people, right? So that's why cultural globalization is often equated with Westernization or Americanization, okay? So if you look at the examples of things we use that are from the West or things we enjoy, then, I mean, the things we sort of enjoy that are not sort of Korean, then you would sort of agree that they are mostly from the West, right? And that's because of the economic and military power that the West has enjoyed from about, let's say, 200 years ago, right? Now, if that is true, then you know how the economic power is shifting to China, right? So there is a saying that within the next 10, 20 years, China will overtake the USA as the #1 economic powerhouse in the world. And although, you know, Japan is not performing as well as it used to, but there was sort of some hope that with China, Korea, and Japan forming some kind of a bloc, that it could easily become, you know, what the European Union is today, right? Now, even without that, just you know, keeping in mind that China will become the #1 economic powerhouse.
It is since a few days. It was big in the media that it is the biggest powerhouse. It overtook the US
Really?
a week ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was in the media.
In terms of total GDP? Wow. Okay, now it is China #1. Let's say that continues for the next half a century or a century. Then my question is, can we speak of Easternization? And if it does happen, can it be the same as Westernization? Yeah.
I would say, just because economic growth will be the factor of like whole Westernization, because America still has the most military power. So, and they also politically influence other people. Maybe it's because of economic influence also, but China would have to have influence, like direct influence, maybe coercive means also, if they want Easternization too. So you would have to look at other parts, not just economics.
Okay. Yeah.
To elaborate on what you just said, I believe that Westernization is much more successful than the so-called Easternization theory, because America has all the institutions and the laws, the global laws, are all set and fixed to American standards, but to maximize their interests. And it's hard to change that kind of influence that America has right now. And also the political issues in China and the lack of democracy they have in terms of, you can see that in like the protests that are in Hong Kong right now. So I think those political issues inside China has to be solved for China to have more influence and have an Easternization that is actually.
Okay. So the internal problems that China has will not allow China to become the influential country that US is. Okay.
I agree that this asset is already quite westernized a lot. So if there is an westernization, it will also contain Western traits. So it will be more difficult to make an impact.
So Eastern sort of traits already have certain Western aspects or Westernized aspects, so they won't be really Eastern. Yes, good point. Yeah.
To focus on the economic development, a few hundred years ago, the center of the economical center of the world was in the East, then moved to the West very, very slowly. And since a few years, it's going back eastwards, but very, very fast. So I think changes in now maybe Easternization is not a big deal because it's just a start, but I think it will be more and more important.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about China, but I thought of the counter argument about the so-called Easternization. The spread of the J-pop and the other Japanese elements in the pop culture and the subculture. Most people think of it as a possible Easternization in the near future. But I think of it as a hybrid, let's say, something that's mutated out of the Western culture.
So cultural hybridization. So that's sort of related to what he said. There's nothing really Eastern anymore because our culture has been so corrupted, so much influenced by the West. So good example would be our popular culture. Is there anything that is uniquely Korean? or hybrids, right? We just mix all these different elements from the West and then add a little bit of Korean element, just by being Korean, I guess. I mean, I'm talking about K-pop, right? If you look at anything that's really Korean, it's the singers themselves, right? But the musical style, dance, all of that is very much influenced by the West.
I just thought that the main reason why Westernization is possible was because people around the world were very attracted by the lifestyles of the West, like the way they dress, the foods they eat. But if you take a look at China, people aren't that attracted to like,
the Chinese style.
Yeah, the life they live.
That's probably because our mindset has already been brainwashed, right? You know, willingly or unconsciously, subconsciously, we have been sort of, again, led to believe that things Western are superior, right? So I think for China to become really that, you know, great influential sort of center culturally, it'll take a really long time because we ourselves need to sort of, you know, de-Westernize ourselves. You've heard of the concept called Orientalism? It's a powerful concept where we, as Asians or Orientals, have simply embraced or accepted the ideas of the West as being true. Okay? So, again, that is a powerful concept because that is true. How many of us can we really be objective in seeing ourselves in comparison to the West or Westerners? We already have this very, you know, sort of, again, relatively negative views of ourselves in comparison to Westerners or Western culture, because that is the Western view. And we have simply embraced that, right? So because of Orientalism, at least, I think China has a lot more work to do to make itself, right, more accepted. Because many of our judgments on China themselves are judgments made by the West, you see? But you've been exposed to those ideas without you knowing consciously. So when you see CNN, BBC World News, don't think they're objective. They're not. They simply share the views of Americans, of the British, okay? In many ways. Not always, but in many ways. At times they're objective, but at many more times they're very slanted toward their own interests, okay? But we are exposed to them without knowing that we are being exposed, okay? So that's why many countries now have set up English-speaking channels, right? Including China, Korea, Germany, Italy. So every country that has some means, has financial resources, is doing the same. And in a way, it's a way to fight this sort of a dominance of the English-speaking countries, like the United States and United Kingdom. And this is where I like to bring your attention to this idea that, you know, you use this term America, right? Why should we use the term America to refer to the United States? That's very American. But America refers to the whole of the whole continent. But they were so full of themselves, without really, is that a bad language? They were so confident, they were so arrogant, that they call themselves America. I'm from America. World Series, World Championship, when it is their national championship, right? But see, we just without critically thinking, simply accept those ideas. But we shouldn't, right? So that's why in Spanish, they call Americans, in translation, United Statesians, right? Because they're not Americans, because Americans refer to all of America. So when we start thinking this, I think we could speak of cultural globalization that is less dominated by the West, okay? And I don't know if I share this with you, please never call Native Americans Indians, okay? That's a very racist term used by Columbus. And, you know, if we keep on using that term, that's just a terrible way to put these very sort of unjustly treated people, right? So what term should you use? Native American, okay? All right. So can anyone else want to talk about this issue? With only about 5 minutes left, I don't want to move on, but maybe just close with this idea, okay? Can Easternization, if it ever to happen in earnest, be the same as Westernization? And you got to think in a really long sort of a term, because you know, the Westernization became what it is in just what, 200, 300, maybe 500 years, right? But if you look at the human history in the next 500,000 years, and given the population dominance, demographic dominance, right? You know, Chinese, Indian population, and you add, actually adding them together is not a good idea, because even the way Asia is what? Is Western conceptualization, right? Because can you imagine Asia including the Middle East, India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, with Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia? Who made this up? It's the West, okay? But we're so different, unlike Europe, right? So again, it's I'm not talking about something new, but at least under the topic of cultural globalization, you really need to question a lot of things that have been taken for granted. Okay, so you know, that's the last message I want to give you. And do you have any questions before we close? And for those of you who are visiting today, I hope you had fun. And Thursday, the video, right? The documentary. Okay, thank you.